subject today is information, and from the very short conversation we had before the show, you have a very, very advanced ability to tap into a huge amount of information. And that must be a rather incredible experience, beginning with something that happened to you at 9 years of age, where you tapped into the Akashic of an entire football audience during a play as your kind of introduction into this as a young child. Love to hear that story, Andrew.
Actually, it was a baseball game. It was the old Cleveland Stadium. It was a stadium built in the early 1920s under a work project agreement. I was 9 years old. My dad took me to the game, and it was bottom of the ninth inning, and it was tied score, and somebody hit a home run, and our team won. And everybody in the stadium stood up and started cheering. And at that point, every person that was there, 83,000 people, all of their Akashic records came into my conscious mind and into my cellular memory. And from that point on, I knew I was completely 100% different. Before 9 years old, if I was around people long enough, I would download their Akashic records at a very slow rate. So it could take me 2 to 3 hours or a week to download a person's Akashic record. And I was a very active child, reading well beyond my abilities, and didn't have anyone to speak to it. I grew up in a Greek family that worked in the restaurant business. Age 6 years old, I started working every summer, 30 hours a week, every weekend. It's not that I didn't have a choice, but at the same time I didn't. As I grew older and older, there were more and more experiences where everywhere I went, if you were within a few hundred yards of me, your Akashic record just came in and downloaded direct to my cellular memory. And as I grew more into my spirituality, I found a Native American path and began to work with the Huichol Indians and a number of other Native American tribes. And I began to understand what my skill was about. And as it began to get bigger and bigger, the whole concept of what I was and the type of psychic reader I was completely different than anyone else out there. I began to identify species when I would read people, if you were Pleiadian or Andromedan, Arcturian or Gregorian, and then I began to be able to read soul contracts quite literally. When you come into this world, you have a soul language that's based into your DNA Akashic records, and it represents what you're here to do. And then I began to understand that soul contracts have fine print in them that's inserted by the people that run the Incarnation grid, and that fine print lures you into different types of karma and drama. And that's where I began to understand that the type of society we live in is a media-driven society. It's no longer passed down by old traditions, and all the generations alive now are amalgamated into a single generational society that doesn't understand about their psychic talents, that is unable to access their soul contracts or what their soul families are like. At this given time, there's about 2,200 separate soul families on this world, and that equates to the 7,300,000,000 people that live on this world. So that's how small of a world we are on soul family status. And as I began to get deeper and deeper into this, I was called to do radio, and there was a concept that was brought to me called the Galactic Historian. And there were 4 people ahead of me that had the choice to be this lifetime. They all said no, and when it came to be my turn, I said yes. And that's when I began to unlock the codes that put all of the Akashic records of the 20,000 worlds that I lived on into a singular format that which I could understand and then translate back into 3D human linguistics.
Wow. Okay, so in your interpretation of someone's existence, when you look at their Akashic record, to what extent do you differentiate between the fact you're looking at someone's Akashic record or actually communicating with their higher mind, or is there no difference? Are they one and the same thing?
There is a big difference. When I read a person, first thing is I don't enter that person. And that's a big thing in the psychic reading industry is they actually enter your energetic field. You are a stream of information to me, and you are completely 100% transparent, quite literally, on a soul contract level. And when I read a soul contract, it allows me to understand all the past lives that are attached to it. So it's like an information tree. And the deeper I go into the tree, there are more layers of past life information, off-world and on-world. And I read them in layers. When I look at a person, I read their body layer first. It tells me the level of health that they're in. And if there's a soul sickness based off of an organ failure or some type of brain injury, or they're just a depressed person, it's reflective in their outer energy. At the same time, I perceive people above the visual spectrum and below the visual spectrum. And the Akashic records of a person exist 1 second into the future and 1 second in the past. So for me to access them and function them, I must be able to literally exist 1 second in the future, because that's how you process the information. And then 1 second in the past, that allows me to understand what the past life information relates to the present me, who must translate into 3D matrix linguistics.
So when you meet someone for the first time, what normally jumps out at you for a person? Is there some particular aspect of the things you've just mentioned? It's kind of a very long laundry list of aspects of a person's life you can mention. Is it again different for everybody in what jumps out at you first, depending on their personal circumstances, or does there tend to be a pattern in how the information flows through from your experience of a new person?
There is a pattern. I try not to stereotype, but I also don't turn it on all the time, because I learned a long time ago I don't need to know everything. And that's what being what I do makes me capable of doing it on air 15, 20 hours a week and 30 to 40 hours of private readings a week. I don't need to know everything, but if I need to know anything, I simply tap into the person. And oftentimes a person is ready. They will empower their Akashic records to come forward. At times I run into people that have the traditional redaction. Like if you're reading a CIA document, there's just black marks all over it. That means at one point in time, that person's soul was powerful enough to put a black mark over their Akashic records so no one could read it through them.
Okay.
I can see through that. And that's because I've lived in every soul family here. I've seen all the techniques as well as the techniques on the off-world. So when I read a person, if I give them the eyebrow raised and look deep into them, it's an instantaneous download, and it's a matter of processing the back and then bringing the information to them so that the actual person that's hearing it can process it.
Okay, so the redactions are generally because let's just call it the higher mind, because of the drama they're playing out with that particular aspect of them, aspect of their soul, the shard. They don't necessarily want the physical being to know certain bits of information because it's important in the game they're playing to not know all of the game rules that are going on. Is that why things are redacted?
No, actually, when you come through the birth canal, you completely forget everything. That's the function of the way this world works. When you redact part of your Akashic records, or it's redacted for you, it's because you are preventing the forces of domination and control understanding your tree of life so that they can manipulate you on a DNA level, soul level. Michael and Peter are classic examples of redacted people. They were able to function in this world and manifest into this time without being captured and turned into dark entities. And it's literally a camouflage way of preventing these scanning spirits that go all throughout the world looking for people that didn't plan their life properly.
Okay. So sort of cloaking aspects of yourself.
Correct.
Fascinating. Okay, but you can actually see through that. Do you need the sort of the soul's permission to do that, or you can just do it?
Everybody's transparent to me. But at the same time, I come from a completely sacred, neutral perspective. I do not violate a person's free will in any way, shape, or form. So when a person is transparent to me, I understand everything, but I may not repeat everything because that person isn't in a mind state or paradigm to understand it, or may not have the linguistic functions within them to comprehend what it is.
Yeah.
And I call that psychic vomit. And there's many psychics that give way too much information.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a certain amount of respect I think you've got to have for the person and the situation and the, if you like, the plot of the drama they're living. They're here for a reason. You don't want to actually upset their apple cart. It's not your place to intrude, I gather, which is quite extraordinary. A cousin of mine defined it really well when she was watching my instructor one day. She said he's wonderful because he tells you just what you need to know next in order to move forward. And I think that's
exactly the way I do it.
Yeah.
I'm all about empowering the person, revealing techniques and coping skills with them so they can identify negative habit patterns within them and how they attach to other parts of their past lives. And when they go through the self-realization and self-actualization that they're in a habit pattern, the type of reading I do when I bring up past life information or soul contract information is to empower the physical person there to use their free will 100% to expand, explore, understand, and then recycle parts of themselves that are no longer functioning properly. You know, people regularly have parts of themselves that are still projecting on their future versions of themselves, and that's limiting them. And when I bring up parts of themselves, like people that are the classic example, like if you were in a family that's dysfunctional, which we all come from in some way, shape, or form, if you had a mother and father that would yell and scream at each other but never physically hurt each other, and you were the child stuck in between, you are a sponge to that energy. And it's very prevalent on the adult person. And I get people to talk about those scenarios too elemental in nature. I tell them to talk to the fire or talk to the wind. And they bring up those memories, and then they can recycle the memory so it goes into cellular memory instead of awake memory. And then you have more space to allow dream realms to download into your awake brain, and so you can remember more of stuff.
So this is why when I'm riding my bike or running, that I can actually dump baggage.
Absolutely.
Fascinating. Okay. I just have one question about your past, going right back to the start of your story. When you downloaded 83,000 Akashic records, how is it that you weren't completely overwhelmed at that point in time by what had happened and you know, just because it could have been a moment where your whole psyche could have crumbled under the sheer volume of information?
No, it did, actually. Well, it was a unique 3 weeks, actually, because it was all in my head, and as a young kid, you're learning this information. I remembered everything about Lemuria. I remembered everything about Atlantis. I remembered everything about Egypt. And it was all within a thought's mind for me. And my parents like, what's going on in your head? And I couldn't tell them. I mean, instinctively and psychically, I knew if I told them the future that I was already predicting I just couldn't. Because at that point, all of my psychic talents had been turned on to the maximum level. And there were a number of spirit guides that came to me and helped me put this into cellular memory instead of awake memory, and teach me the skills to make sure that I didn't constantly bring it to awake memory. And those spirit guides were my soul family, and they were the ones that were helping people that were going to make choices in the future to be the galactic historian.
Yeah. With the fact that you were mentored through this process, there are a lot of people who've been classified as having, you know, mental breakdowns, nervous breakdowns, etc. When I think what's actually happening is they're having an experience like yours. And we had a show a couple of weeks back where we talked about overlapping the senses, which you know, has all of the symptoms of schizophrenia. Whether this incredible download talent that you had could have overwhelmed you and would have been diagnosed simply as some disorder of the psyche, and they'd have popped you on drugs for the rest of your life and put you in an institution. Yet you managed, with the help of your mentors, to actually get through it.
See, they really weren't mentors, because I came in with very distinct contracts that I couldn't be helped. I had to do it myself. That's the only way you could become a galactic historian. There's only been 3 other galactic historians in the last 52 million years.
Wow. And
each one has died a horrible death.
Okay. Are you talking about incarnating on this planet or elsewhere?
No, in the 52 million year history of the 7 galaxies involved in the drama.
Wow.
If somebody knows all the drama, that means you can't hide any secrets.
And to what extent are you aware of the future of the drama at any point in time?
Well, it's like if you're very familiar with a TV show and you've watched every episode and they come up with a new one, you can just get it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was talking about the mentors, they were only there for a period of 2 weeks, quite literally. And it was under very strict circumstances, because if they were detected, I would get ejected out of this world. I came here under broken spiritual rule contracts, because there's so many different layers of courts, of spiritual courts of equity and spirit laws that were completely broken to universal law.
Mm-hmm.
So when you want to begin to understand spiritual contract, there's a primary incarnation grid, there's a backdoor incarnation grid, and then there's the hollow earth grid that allows powerful spirits to exist in hollow earth. So a number of those entities that were helping me came out of hollow earth and literally risked their entire existence in the time stream to make sure that at some point in the future, if it came to my turn, I could say yes or no.
Okay, so that was part of an arrangement that you had with those beings prior to incarnating here to try and make it to that position?
Yep.
Wow. Well, I'm really glad you survived that process and are here now because, well, we've got 3 callers with questions and we could easily have 300 because that's a pretty extraordinary thing that you're actually living through. Now, Andrew, before we proceed, you brought up a couple of things which have kind of tweaked my interest here. So before we go on, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. You referred to the incarnation grid as being hijacked and having extra fine print putting into contracts. Do you want to expand on what you mean by hijacking the incarnation grid?
It's a really big multi-dimensional story, but I'll try to put it as simple as I can. If I lose you, have Michael or Peter will jump in. They understand this. There's a group of extra-dimensional, multi-dimensional entities that 460,000 years ago migrated to this planet. These entities are 6th, 7th, and 8th dimensional beings. They're so big in energy they cannot fit into a single human being. So what they did is broke themselves up into thousands and millions of different sparks and then entered the Earth incarnation grid and made separate contracts with each individual version of themselves and entered soul families. And as they began to invest more and more and more of themselves, these 15 beings essentially became 40% of the population on this planet. That was 15 beings, 40% of the total population. At that point, they had off-world allies that they had given a technology to where they learned how to take a soul out of a body and rapidly increase its vibration and then shoot it across the galaxy so it would enter the Earth's astral grid and then be forced incarnated through the incarnation grid to be on this world, and then the little pieces, parts of themselves began to interbreed with these other pieces, and this began what's called the invasion. And this invasion is a totally different concept of warfare. And so finally they brought in huge versions of these other beings and created a soul family here on Earth, and they literally hijacked the incarnation grid because they were the master breeders here.
Wow. Okay.
And that's called the Archon grid by popular modern terms, even though it's much more drastic than that.
Okay, so this situation that's going on at the moment, geopolitically, is an outcome from this Archon grid.
Correct.
Archon. Okay, that is a fascinating bit of information. Absolutely fascinating. Questions, Andrew? You said that some 100,000 years ago, 15 beings came here and literally invested themselves into the incarnation grid here. Now, my question for you now is, were they invited? Were they supposed to come? They weren't. Okay, so they weren't supposed to come here.
This is the next part of the history here. The solar system we live in was built from the ground up. You know, what it's called the Galactic Ascension machine. And there were 3 galaxies that were part of the 5th generation of created galaxies in our universe. And around the 5th generation of our galaxy, there were only about 300, maybe 400,000 actual galaxies here, instead of the trillions that we have now. So the universe was much smaller then. And these beings were part of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th generation of new beings that came here. One galaxy, its purpose was to expand the concept of free will with no limitations, and that created war. And when these beings, these 15 original beings were part of our galaxy, our original galaxy, and when the war galaxy came here, you had 3 separate prime creators of those galaxies that were coming together to try to figure out how this universe was going to mix. Well, that's known as the Great Mistake, because this galaxy wasn't ready for the war galaxy to come in. Earth was a 7th dimensional galactic seed planet. Its purpose was literally to bring new life to brand new planets that were being built. When I say built, a soul literally becomes a planet and then receives DNA wisdom from another source, and then that's what souls can use as a framework to incarnate on a planet. Earth being a seed planet, its purpose, it has 200 separate womb chakras, and then the people that live on Earth were able to create the DNA knowledge within these womb chakras to literally manifest new concepts of wisdom DNA And then that DNA would be brought to our moon, and our moon would then psychically transport all of this information to the blank Akashic record of a new world. And then that world would have soul families come in there and begin the process of incarnation. Earth was literally hijacked just before it was going to be rolled out and put into this service. So Earth was teleported away from its purpose, and it was tremendously hurt. At that point, she called out to the universe, and healers from around the universe and beyond began a migration here. And this is when these multidimensional beings became aware of what was going on here. They saw war, and these beings were so old and so bored, they decided to go out and have fun. They came here, and Earth was freed and brought back to the side of the light, but the war concept had already been introduced, and that's the beginning of the dramatic episodes. These multidimensional beings began to perceive time in layers and understood that this was going to be a very fun place for a very long time, and made sure they had enough pieces, parts of themselves, so that they could stir up the drama anywhere else in the galaxy, and then people would be drawn to Earth. Well, to resolve the great drama that these beings had started, the higher beings of this universe basically took all of the big dramatic planets from the different parts of the galaxy and put them into one solar system. So quite literally, they teleported all these extra planets here. There's 66 planets in our solar system, and those represent the 66 prime dramatic lines of information. So if you need to resolve your karma with any of the dramatic planets here, you have to come to this solar system. This solar system is in the center between three separate galaxies. So imagine three circles, and the center where those three circles intersect is where we are. So souls have to constantly migrate here. When they migrate here, they have to go through the vibratory process of Mars, of Venus, of Pluto, of all the other ones until they reach the vibration of Earth, which is the highest part of the Galactic Ascension machine. When you graduate here, you get the opportunity to create yourself as a sun or as a planet, or to move on as a higher multidimensional being. So this is the place where everyone resolves drama. And it was done because multiple parts of the galaxies were polluted by this drama, and they needed to get rid of the pollution. And the resolution was to put all the dramatic planets into a single solar system.
Okay, so did I hear you correctly? You said there are 66 planets or 6 planets?
66.
66. So some of them, we're talking about a multi-dimensional solar system then?
Yes, every solar system's multidimensional. It's just a matter of how you perceive it. But all 66 planets are physically visible, but the size of our solar system is much bigger than our perception.
Okay, so are you saying that they're out beyond Pluto?
Yes, well beyond Pluto.
Okay. At this point in time, there's all sorts of stories floating about as to the archonic grid actually being replaced by something new. How do you judge those stories? What's your aspect, your take on that?
The purpose of what we're going through now between June 2011 and August 2014 is the prime time of galactic energies for a consciousness change in this world. 560,000 years ago, the drama had gotten so bad and the Galactic Ascension machine wasn't functioning as a well-oiled machine. The oversouls of this planetary system and the solar system came together with the prime creator and said, we have to figure out a way to fix this. So what they did is they broke everything down into a council of 12. That council of 12 was 4 members of the light, 4 members of the dark, and 4 members of the neutral. They were tasked with taking the 2,200 invested races and soul families and reduce them through breeding into a single species, so that species could go back out to all the other dramatic areas and begin to heal those species of their karma. And that comes to where Michael and Peter talk about we are creator beings. And quite literally, when we graduate here, we get our PhD in the School of Hard Knocks, and then we go back and begin healing the rest of the galaxy. But it got so bad, as I was saying, the Council of 12 couldn't come within any agreement. So one group was trying to force incarnate their versions. The light were doing the same thing, until finally the light and the dark had become so polarized they couldn't accept anything about the neutral perspective. So the dark guys began going after the homeworlds of the neutral people and basically saying, I'll kill 10 billion people unless you leave. So one by one, all of the neutral parts of the Council of 12 were removed. There was a big battle between the light and dark of who would take their space, until it finally broke down to the Council of 12 was 7 dark and 5 light. And that was right around 410,000 years ago. And since then, we've been having this off-kilter incarnation grid where the Archons, because the dark can bring more of their beings in, can literally control the incarnation grid and put in fine print. Well, all of the beings understood that when Prime Creators set up this Council of 12, that there was an end date, and that end date would be called what's the audit. And the audit is when the Prime Creator comes into this world and reads every soul contract from the ground up of all existence and understands the equation in total, where there are no secrets. And if the 2,200 soul families were becoming one, the Council of 12 would be allowed to continue their management. Well, they completely failed on it. March 22nd to 23rd, 2013 was the audit. They completely failed, and now the beings that are on the council are being replaced with walk-ins who will complete the job.
Wow. And the job is, do you want to state what the cleanup is going to be?
It is to bring back the concept that the resolution here is that the 2,200 soul families, the 2,200 invested races here, become a single DNA race that can go back out to the galaxy and begin healing the other species that are no longer connected to a tree of life, or only use cloning as a function of expanding their species, because many of these species can no longer have children naturally. They have no sex organs, they bred it out of them. And we will be beings that help them get back into a tree of life connected to a planet sacred feminine. We will teach them how to be pregnant. We will teach them how to raise children. We will teach them how to be mother and father, as well as teaching them about what it is we resolved here in the three-dimensional dramatic world.
So Earth was always meant to be a world that produced those kinds, that standard of being, obviously a very high standard of being, to clean up problems elsewhere in the galaxy. That was its original purpose?
Its original purpose was to be a galactic seed planet, to bring literally brand new life, wisdom, DNA to a blank Akashic record world.
Okay,
but it was hijacked, and the new purpose was to resolve the drama and karma between the introduction of a war. And the only way to do that was to get a massive amount of migration of spirits here, so that when it came time for graduation date, there were enough spirits to go back out into the galaxy, because the universe had been expanding ever since the very beginning parts of this drama. And there were soul families that had gone and made planets or gone away from the drama, but they still have unresolved karma, and we will be those creator beings who come there as healers, as ambassadors, to bring knowledge, to bring wisdom, and to share and break bread and begin to open up the concept that the drama has come to an end.
And it's Prime Creator's will that, having done the audit and finding the results to be unsatisfactory, that the shift to the new mode of operation will take place.
Correct. And we're in a situation where the dark guys, just before the audit, they were trying to alter Prime Creator's vision, even though he realized that. So what happened? I used this association.
Sorry, they actually tried to interfere with the boss.
Oh yeah, and they tried to create. This was from CERN, the big hadron collider in France. Its purpose was actually to block Prime Creator from the audit. It was meant to basically fudge the numbers in the audit.
They're a very bunch of cheeky employees, aren't they?
Oh yeah. Well, what happened is when they did that, they got ejected from the game. Like in football, when you get a red card, they got ejected. Well, the light guys did that too. There are some light beings that are so far up the butt of light, they only see darkness because they're so far into polarity. So quite a number of them got ejected from the game too. So a whole new layer of management needs to be brought in for the light and the dark. But at that point is where the Prime Creator literally brought the walk-in rule, where it said, if you failed at this audit and you were part of this contractual product from the very beginning, your soul that was in there was taken out, and a being that's part of the prime neutral perspective was put in, because there's no neutral perspective in the council. And that's how it's being brought into balance, by all of the members of the High Council, and that the high part, the big beings, are being replaced with an equivalent amount of neutral being who has no dogmas or political concepts.
So that's the correction that Prime Creator has brought about. He's reshuffled the management council.
Correct.
Literally. Fabulous.
Yep.
So okay, there's your management clean out. So
as well as allowing walk-ins on a mass scale on Earth.
So the allowance of walk-ins, I mean, that apparently goes back probably the best part of a century. How does this manifest on the ground? I mean, this management shuffle, is it something that happens at an instant in time, or is it something that in fact was ordained and has been happening temporally? That is the walk-ins, say March 2013, the audit was done, they failed, action was taken. Did that result in temporal shifts going back 100 years, as in temporal activities?
No and yes. Well, you got to understand, June 2011, we were brought onto a single timeline, and there's going to be a lot of people who have a tough time with this. What it was is, there's been time wars that have been going on here for a very long time, and the whole purpose of the time wars is these multidimensional beings are trying to influence the theme of our awakening. So they brought propaganda, Planet X, Nibiru, or any of that. We are creator beings, and if they bring a high amount of propaganda, we will believe it and create that. And the whole point of the awakening is to claim your free will separate of the incarnation grid and allow yourself to understand Earth's original purpose. So the whole walk-in, all of that is understanding that when you take something out and replace it with something, it has to still function with all those spirit contracts that walk-in entity that they came into. And many of these entities are time travelers. And when they unified the timeline into a single stream, all the tangent streams ended. But since so many of us were on multiple timelines and never knew it, when we go to sleep, we dream ourselves into those other timelines. It's like a person who's had an arm cut off and has ghost limb syndrome, and we have to stop ourselves from creating these fake timelines again, and that's where we're at. So the neutral beings that are walk-ins are keeping the timeline a single timeline, so we live long enough to accept that, there's none of these extra timelines.
I think my picture of the universe many-fold, but the detail that you're bringing to it, Andrew, is actually really, really meaningful to a lot of stuff that really bothers me about this world. It explains a hell of a lot. So I thank you for that. It's been absolutely incredible, and we're only not even quite an hour into the show. The timeline travelers, the people that have come here to unify the timeline.
Oh yeah. Timeline, just to even begin the concept, you have to understand the multidimensional being concept. Because what they do is they have multiple versions of themselves spread out through a linear timeline, and then they brought in technology so different parts of themselves can create tangent timelines, and then they could literally incarnate other parts of themselves in other parts of the timeline, and then bring soul family with them that are sleeper agents. So the whole purpose is to create propaganda that would manifest deep in the future. And the light guys are always trying to counter the timeline movement, cut this other stuff out. So it's like trying to play a multi-dimensional game of chess 200,000 moves ahead of time. And the only way you can do it is by planning your actual soul's lifetime 10,000 or 100,000 lifetimes in advance. And that's what I did. I planned my lifetime for the last 52 million years so I could be here now.
So this is the game that the Archontic beings enjoy playing, this massively complex interdimensional chess game. That's fun for them?
Yep. I call them the intergalactic mafia because they're trading our DNA so that they can recreate the galactic ascension machine somewhere else. It's always been the prize to get Earth and then to make a bunch of other drama planets and make a galactic ascension machine somewhere else. Because what these beings are doing is literally challenging Prime Creator to say, no, we're the new guys on the block, and we are going to be the Prime Creators in this galaxy, and we're going to beat you. So there'll be two separate Prime Creators from the galaxy. That's their whole purpose now.
And they're not going to succeed? Is that what you're saying?
They've already failed.
The management. Okay.
They already failed. Yep. But the thing is, we have to remove them because they're soul family. It's like when you got a rotten member of your family, you love them, but you can't live with them.
Mm-hmm.
We have to eliminate our contracts with them. And that's what reclaiming your free will during this time of empowerment is about. Anything that inserts fine print must go.
Fascinating concept. So how do you reclaim your free will?
First of all, it requires going inside and healing parts of yourself. You have to be willing to look at yourself and to identify that there are parts of yourself that no longer apply to the adult you. And you have to realize, well, the type of damage that your innocent inner child did that shaped your life, as well as the good and the bad. And I commonly call this talking to the fire. I'm a fire shaman and a dream interpreter. When I function in the dream world, I'm in the North Pole and the South Pole at the same time. The North Pole is literally where the dream worlds exist, and the South Pole is where the astral world exists, where the new souls that are coming in here to plan their incarnation, they exist in the South Pole, and then they live through us vicariously to experience what the matrix world is like so that they can figure out what soul family they want to be in. Reclaiming your free will is about literally understanding the matrix is trying to define you through propaganda of what type of co-creating manifestor spirit you're going to be, and you must disconnect from that through meditation, through self-healing, through ascended mastery courses, and begin the process of unplugging from this muddy world until you understand that this world has several layers layered on top of it and layered below it, and that your perception is the key to understanding the matrix as what is the defining propaganda of all these multidimensional beings that takes place between 2011 and 2014.
Now, the propaganda is being perpetuated at ground level in 3D reality by the media machine which drives our thought.
Yep.
Particularly in the Western world. What about the Eastern world, where the Western media is not so prevalent?
Well, it's controlled by a different media source, and it uses their culture against them. Example, in China, they're extremely big on ancestor spirits, but if you watch Chinese TV, they actually degrade the ancestor spirit concept so that people don't adhere to it anymore. And there's a huge, huge following of Christianity in China that was brought there on purpose so that would separate them from their ancestor spirits.
So religions like Christianity, to what extent are they propaganda? If you look at the Bible as a block of information, my perception of the Bible is that it's a mixture of information and disinformation, going back to the theme of this whole show, information and how you process it. Do you view in Christianity as in its entirety as being a control mechanism, or was it something that was supposed to be an injection of pure kind of thought and was polluted?
When I began to put the entire story together, when it came time for Jesus to come in, who was a very powerful light being, and 400 years later when they decided to write the Bible, there were a group of multidimensional beings who were these pieces parts that were already leapfrogging through time, and many of them are already existing on the future timeline, that wrote that book to be a part of their propaganda that was spread throughout the years. Now, the beings of light were tremendously distressed when they figured this out, and so they mass incarnated beings of light to make sure that the church was something good. But at the same time, it was a part of a propaganda machine written by the same multidimensional beings who were looking to control 2011 to 2014. Now, all religions' purpose here is slightly right and slightly wrong. The only thing that ever came even close to getting right was the Buddhists, but they also got it wrong, because it's all about free will. And if you really pay attention to the knowledge, wisdom of Jesus, it's about claiming your power and understanding that all people are created equal. All sentients are created equal. There is no single species that is dominant. We are all inheritors of the earth. And that is the message that was twisted so that they could make different sects of different religions, make them think that they are the only survivor species. They are the only one that will inherit the will of God. The will of God's for everyone. And all religions will have to go through the Reformation based off of how they self-manipulated themselves through history. And the Vatican is a political organization. Face it, Christianity one day was a government with 25 ruling families, and the next day was a religion with 50 ruling families. That's the facts, literally. And when you understand that they realize that governments end and religions endure, that is where religion was hijacked to become government. And as religion became government, it began enforcing the morality of religion as well as the morality of a government that was a dominating, conquering government. So the Bible has many wonderful stories and has taught many beautiful spirits the messages, but at the same time it's enforced propaganda for separate sects to create their own versions. And that's the true deception of these multidimensional beings.
Great way to start a war.
Yep.
If you want some drama, start a war. That's always been the theme of the governments of this planet, the hidden governments of this planet. Whenever everything starts to get a little bit too moving in a direction that you don't want it to move it into, start a war. And religion's a fantastic way of doing that. So right at this point in time, Andrew, the future appears to be approaching, in day-to-day life, a turning point, crossroads.
Mm-hmm.
How do you perceive that?
Well, right now we're in timeout. As I was saying, players got ejected, and we'll be in timeout until the 21st of June. And that means none of the management that wasn't removed is allowed to make any significant action. But because so many of the middle and upper crust management have been under contract of domination and control for so long, they're following through with what they've been programmed to do, even though the upper management has said stop. So it's a runaway freight train right now. And during this timeout, as I said, the upper guys cannot act. And that includes the forces of light. But what is allowed to act is to make sure that we are a stable environment that will not cause drastic earth changes so that people can reclaim their free will and begin to understand we are co-creating manifesting spirits. After the 21st, the big players will begin to act again. Many of the big players during this timeout phase have said, we give up. But they can't because they're contractually bound to their own things that they've created over the last 52 million years. They are stuck into their own timeline concepts. They are literally in this point where the freight train is going to crash into the event. And the event has not been put into the fires of creation yet. So we are still in this phase where we have to reclaim our free will.
Okay, now you say there's an event that's not yet been put into the fires of creation. So there's going to be a twist in the game. There's going to be something that shifts everybody's consciousness. That's the general impression I'm getting. Is that what
Correct.
You've concluded? There's going to be a consciousness shift, okay. But no one knows at this point exactly how that will play out or exactly when.
Correct. And only the Prime Creator knows that. Because he's the only one that can see the entire equation for its root answer. And we are an ever-evolving equation because every day people wake up or go to sleep. And these multidimensional beings' whole purpose was to use propaganda to make a predictive model. So what will happen between 2011 and 2014 is enforcing a statistical predictive model based over 52 million years of timeline manipulation.
So they're essentially playing the chess game over 52 million years. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
And it's all come to this point.
Yep. This is the end date.
After that, let's set aside the drama, set aside the actual event. Past the event, at the conclusion of the drama, what are we looking at on this planet? What will it look like to you?
That determines how things roll out. If we determine if we're going to be a single species or not. So much drama has happened that there will be beings that will not accept the single species. So we may end up with several parallel Earths coexisting on top of each other that go through an adjusting phase where the high beings of light can come in and begin unifying the world. Off air, Michael and I, and as well as on my other show, as well as Peter, we talked about a concept that there's essentially 5,800 separate city-states here in our world. In each of those is a dream world creator. So New York City, Los Angeles, London, Melbourne, wherever the big population centers are, that's where there's an amassment of dreamtime energy, and those will all create local realities. So there'll be 5,800 local realities that'll have to come into unity by experiencing the unified dream world of Earth itself. And during the event process, really what it is these 5,800 separate Dreamtime societies coming into Unity Dreamline as a global Dreamtime society. So again, the event is multidimensional, multi-level, many different ways. But there will be Dreamtime cities or societies that will not accept it, and they will dream themselves into another world, essentially.
That's a fascinating thing, because one of the aspects of sci-fi that's always attracted me is the idea of city-states. That's a very, very common theme in literature, and if even movies, you look at movies, Atlantis, the idea of Atlantis, the city of Atlantis, as being a sort of almost a separate living entity. That is, to me, a not impractical way of running a planet, provided, of course, there's not conflict, actually having those differences. And when you look at it from a Dreamtime point of view, with millions of people in one place, all dreaming, and in their conscious life co-creating unconsciously, it's absolutely no wonder that different cities have such different characteristics. Here we've got this Sydney-Melbourne paradigm. They're different places. They have a different feeling to them. And do you think part of our future is going to be a planet with these quite markedly different and consciously aware of this city-states?
Yes. How the event unfolds, I don't know. But again, I've seen these episodes. It's like, again, describing, I've seen all the episodes of a TV show. And if they come up with one new episode, you can kind of get the theme. And my personal opinion, and it's just an opinion, is when it all begins to iron itself out, it'll still be 2,000 separate cities. Some of the soul families will begin to separate by density and age and soul family relationships. And then one part of the Earth will be highly technological, and one part of the Earth will be non-technological and returning to Earth. So these beings can create a new culture based off of unified Dreamtime society. So if a high-technology person wants to take a vacation on a low-technology part of Earth, they can. Or if a low-technology person wants to come in and learn about technology that may apply to their low-technology life, that'll happen too.
No sign of change in the propaganda. In
Nope.
public life, it's all still flowing out. This is going to be a big surprise for a lot of people.
No. My personal opinion is we're not going to see absolutely anything happen. And I've said this many, 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 many times. They can stretch this out for 20 years if they have to. And until you see people out marching in the street in the same scale and size as the 1960s, you are not free, and there is no ascension.
So the consciousness shift is going to have to play out by people actually, getting out of their seats, getting off their butts, and exerting their free will.
Yep. Because only your free will is what can eliminate your contracts and your fine print contract with these multidimensional beings who've hijacked our grid.
Could you repeat that statement? It was broken up a bit. Only free will?
Only your free will is what can learn to eliminate the fine print contract with the hijacked incarnation grid, as well as with those negative parts of your soul family, which are these multidimensional beings.
Okay, so what it's doing is essentially you're removing the fine print they stuck in your contract and the baggage that's brought to you.
Correct.
Okay, folks, I hope you're listening to that, because that is absolutely what getting up from your chair and exerting your free will is about. That's a really, really significant thing that you've just said there, because that plays out in, I don't like the political situation I'm in, so I am going to change it by my own actions. One of the aspects of my thought on this is the differences in general between the Western world and the rest. Now, overall, do you think it's the Western world and its higher technology and propaganda that's going to have a greater effect on the overall outcome of this?
Well, there's a twist here. Mm-hmm. Because these multidimensional beings needed to create drama on a mass scale, what they did is invite trickster spirits from all over the galaxy to come have some fun. All of these trickster spirits have been stuck here and are really bored of playing with the dumb humans anymore. and are so mad right now that their eyes have forgot about humans, and they are solely focused on the upper crust management of the domination and control and Incarnation grid. So the twist is all of these trickster spirits who want to get out and go trick other people in other parts of the galaxies don't care about us anymore. And the old adage, my enemy's enemy is my friend, is now beginning to function. And after the 21st of June is where these trickster spirits are not in timeout anymore, and they are mad. And I describe it, it's going to be like an episode of Benny Hill or Three Stooges, as they just get exposed more and more and more.
That's a fascinating concept, because one of the things that is going on is that all of this crap is being revealed. It's spilling out. The propaganda machine is having a great deal of trouble excluding the sheer volume of lunacy that's going on, that's becoming really obvious to the casual observer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're saying is going to increase?
Absolutely.
Well, it will be like the Three Stooges then.
Yeah. And at the same time, people ask me this often, what was the 21st of December 2012? What that represented was there was the single moment we had of unified dream time, and the last time we had unified global dreamtime society was 28,000 years ago. And that was a single tick on the clock of the multidimensional clock we live by. We had one brief second where the South Pole began to act like a Jacob's ladder, where the electrical grid came out of the South Pole, where the astral realm is, and came out the North Pole and empowered the North Pole to spread to the entire energetic grid to the South Pole, where we as a species had one brief second where no matter if you're in the light or in the dark side of Earth, you had a moment of unified dream time. And there's physical technology, spiritual technologies, and technologies that keep us separated into these 2,000 or 5,800 separate dream worlds, dream city states. So what we got here is that point in time overrid all the technology, so we had the first taste. And now every tick of the clock away from the 21st, we have another one. That was the 20th of March solstice, then the 21st of June, and then Christmas. You know, so every time there's a new solstice or equinox, we get a little bit more of unified dream time at a global scale.
Is that something that is that tipping the balance towards a unified dream time being a permanent state of affairs? Is that part of the objective?
Correct.
Okay. A question for you. Did the Archons maneuver us into cities for this purpose, to group us so we could be manipulated en masse? Because that started back in the Industrial Revolution. Is that part of their bounding around time and maneuvering us into position for this event?
Yes. Yes. The Industrial Revolution, the whole point of the Industrial Revolution was to put people on a 40, 60, or 100-hour work week so they could never invest into their self-education or free will. And the Industrial Revolution also meant that you had to eliminate those societies that had oral traditions like the Native Americans or the Aborigines or the South Pacific. So that's why there was a massive buildup to eliminate any natural culture, native culture species. By eliminating the people that were the oral traditions changed, you would be forced into living into a mass industrial complex through cities, and then they could manipulate you on a mass scale as we introduced technology. Yes.
Yeah, I think if you look at the starting ceremony or the ending ceremony for the Olympic Games, I think the starting ceremony where they actually looked at the process of industrializing England.
Yep.
It was literally turning people into little ants in a little anthill. And yeah, there's your mass mind control kicking in at that point. Mm-hmm. So as you say, the oral traditions are very important in exploration of the individual self. And if you remove that out of culture and replace it with propaganda, bingo. Mm-hmm. Then you get to control huge numbers of people.
Yep. We're a media-driven culture now. The oral traditions don't exist. The only culture we pass down is through the propaganda media.
And, of course, our wonderful schooling system, which is not an educational system per se, it's a schooling system.
It's an occupational system. It just occupies your time growing up.
Yeah, well,
your propaganda.
The sheer stress that's on people's lives to simply survive from day to day, whilst being fed by this media machine, is the ultimate distraction. People just have no time to invest in their own spiritual individual development. They are simply trying to survive. So, yeah, we've been massively maneuvered. Everything that's happened for hundreds of years has all pointed to this situation where we are literally a controlled society. Now, how does the concept of energy harvesting play into this? It's talked about a lot, and there's obviously humans are incredibly creative, and our creativity is just being focused into activity, allowing us to actually be completely have wagons circled around us by propaganda.
Okay, I'll try to explain this as best as I can. When they set up the Bible and they set up all the war concepts, they set up sacred geometry cities. And sacred geometry cities are meant to separate us on a dream time scale. So there were places where energy would amass. New York City's one, Washington, D.C.'s one, Melbourne's one. And each of these cities that are sacred geometry set up cities are collection points for the local energies of those areas. And then those collection points go into a master collection point, which is the Vatican. And then the Vatican sends that energy into Israel, into the sacred structures that were built there 2,000 and 3,000 or even 100,000 years ago. They understand that there's a grid of pyramids on our world, and there's 9 layers to them, and our world is a fortress. And the only way to stay in charge of the Incarnation grid is to have 1 or 2 layers of the fortress grid. Even though they don't have control over all of the grids, they have control over enough of them to be the dominant of the Incarnation grid. So it's all about coalescing energy and then reinvesting that energy into the systems of domination control, their physical buildings. Like anywhere there's a mass media building, there's sacred geometry built into the building, so that when the upper management sends energy to the system of domination and control, it spreads it out equally, so all the system is equally fed. But each person in this world is taxed on energy from the moment you come out of the birth canal, so there's always a feeding of this system. So when you unplug from the grid, you're not sending any energy. When you unplug from the matrix, you're not sending any energy to it. And it's coming to a point where they are using just about as much energy as they take in to what they put out. And this tipping of the scales for the Unified Dreamtime Society means they're going to be in the minus, and they must start using their own energy. And when they start using their own energy, they cannot maintain the system of domination and control.
Okay. Energetic game. We're back to the energetic game. And folks, if you want to look at a piece of sacred geometry, have a look at a map of Canberra, the capital city of Australia. It is absolutely literally like an eye of Horus.
Yep. Yeah. Washington, D.C. is another great one.
Cities around the world are all based on a sacred geometric dreamtime harvesting principle then.
Correct.
Wow, so they herded us into cities that were essentially dream catchers.
Yep.
Fascinating.
And that's what made us these 5,800 separate Dreamtime city-states. There's actually more, but I limit it to 58. There's about 6,800, 6,700. But many of them don't have enough energy to maintain themselves as an ever-present co-creating dream world, just because there's not enough empowered people in those areas to stay active all the time. So as the moon rises or there's more galactic energies comes in and the ley lines in the area light up, they may be there for a short period of time.
How many people does it take to really make an effective Dreamtime city, as you're describing?
If you had 50 people like Peter and Michael and me, it would be enough to make something as powerful as New York City. Okay, yeah, so there's a massive difference between activated beings and those that are simply in there. Yep.
Interesting. How does someone like you cope with a city then, who's so attuned to the situation? Do you have to stay out of cities?
No, I'm completely disconnected from the Matrix, and I can function in it, and it doesn't interact or create with me in any way, shape, or form. And that's why I'm able to function through my broken rule spiritual contract and be a galactic historian and say everything in a transparent, sacred, neutral perspective.
As a galactic historian, in a sense, right at this moment in time, by simply revealing yourself and revealing aspects of galactic history which people like myself have never heard, and this audience, some of them will have never heard it before, are you not actually creating history at this point, as well as actually bringing history to us?
The answer is yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is yes and no. It's perception. What I bring from the Akashic records rings true to the people that have already claimed their free will. And if it doesn't ring true to them, it's because they may come from a polarity perspective. Everything I do has no political concepts, no dogmas, and I live in a point where all beings are sentient, all sentient beings are created equal. And the code of conduct that I function with is do not infringe the free will of others. But our original purpose of this world has contracts that extend to us, and I'm able to function to those original world contracts and not offend free will. So do I create history? Well, history is already there. I'm translating it into a third-dimensional matrix perspective. I mean, there are layers of information that I don't purposely bring out because it could create a massive misunderstanding.
Indeed. Too much information is not necessarily a good thing. Would you say that you're an aspect of the enforced... I gather what Prime Creator has done is reinforced some neutrality back into this High Council that you're referring to. Would that be correct? Okay.
Correct.
Your existence here is a reflection of that action, because I get you as being neutral to the information.
Correct.
Neither for it nor against it, it's just information.
Correct.
How cool is that?
As I said before, when I was young, I knew that I would get asked to be the Galactic Historian, and I knew I had to function in this world and live a life and even go through polarity and live with the karma and the fine print that I had until I empowered myself to eliminate the fine print from my contract. So it ultimately comes down when Prime Creator came in on the 20th of March to the 22nd and ran the audit. I was a part of the presence that required to create an anchor so that Prime Creator wouldn't be blocked. And then after the audit, my contracts are still exactly the same. And it's as if my soul knew what already was going to happen because I planned this lifetime way, way, way in advance.
Yeah, everything seems to be planned way, way in advance. Getting back to information, and I think we've just touched on a really important aspect of trolling through information, is remaining neutral to it, not bringing any emotional energy to it to distort its actual meaning. Because one of my personal objectives, and I can't always achieve this because sometimes information does generate emotion and that colours it. And you know, the classic emotions are of course things like fear, love, jealousy, envy, all of the sorts of obvious emotions that people bring to it. I mean, I through this entire interview, you've remained completely neutral to all the information you've presented. Absolutely, all the way through.
I've been exposed to the dark's worst of the worst, and I'm not callous to it. It's simply information, part of the history to me, as well as the parts of the light that are wonderfully good that didn't put me to tears, or the acts of light that turned into acts of darkness. Killing in the name of Jesus was a great mistake by the light. And just because they brought in too much information and it was misunderstood and somebody checkmated them in that situation. And when you present it with no emotional coloring, the people that are part of those historical concepts can come to terms with, you know, it's a big game. People outmaneuvered you. And now at the end, allow the history to be transparent, no more secrets, and from there as a species we can learn to come together.
What's your personal objective here, your sole objective as or the Galactic Historian at this moment of now? Do you have any personal objective, or are you simply being a conduit?
I'm simply being me, who's aware that the information stream is limitless, and using my free will to bring about the concept of no more secrets, to empower people with the concept of free will, to empower people to be healers, to heal others, to come to terms with their soul contracts. On the information level, it's transparent to me, and that's the way I present it, as absolutely transparent. On my other shows, people ask me the strangest questions, and I have an answer, generally, but sometimes people aren't ready to hear all the answers, or there's no human linguistics for it. So that's the tricky part.
How do you, I mean, do you actually ever tell people when you're giving them information that you know, I'm not going to tell you everything you want to know?
Not always. If it's somebody I've read privately many times, they get it from me when I'm holding information back. Mm-hmm. For example, one of my Revolution radio show, it's primarily a call-in psychic line. I put people on the floor. I get 20, sometimes 15, 20 callers in every show. And sometimes I'll extend a reading out live on air 45 minutes. And every person's a teacher. Every person that comes on air is a teacher to the other people that are listening.
Yes. Well, we teach others all around us all the time. You know, not necessarily always good things, but we teach. Mm-hmm. So where do we go from here, Andrew? We've got an audience here of people who are interested in developing themselves as energy masters, as energy adepts. What advice have you got from them in terms of developing their ability to read the Akashic, to process the information and to utilize it positively?
Well, the course Michael and Peter have is outstanding, and they take you up to a mastery level. Peter's the information and Michael's the action. And I'd like to bring them in here at this moment and how we all come together by sharing information. You know, that's what my shows are about, is sharing, because coming together as creator beings, we can amplify our education and understanding and teachings.
Indeed. And Michael and Peter, when you first met Andrew, what did you find?
With me is just really comfortable from the start, and then the more that I heard him talk, knowing that he's information-based, and from all the people that I've encountered, I actually started to become prejudiced against people that were information-based because they all seemed to be psychotic, just to say it straight, and they didn't have the grounding or the ability or the pyramid of logical understanding to have access to that level of information and still be sane in the third dimensional aspect of themselves. And so the more I heard Andrew talk, and the more that I hear that it lines up with the core of everything that I'm doing and teaching, which I don't approach it in that informational way. I do it in an energetic way, teaching people to find their outward polarity. As I say often, that it probably wasn't meant to be this way. I'm not informational, but I can imagine that this grid was possibly tampered with, and people weren't born with an interconnectivity to things like we teach in the Energy Mastery course. But that's what I'm heavily based on doing, is getting people to reverse their polarity so they can know both sides, because until you learn energy due to the circumstances of how life is here, you're in the negative polarity. And by that I mean you have the perception that light comes into your eyes, sound comes into your ears, touch comes against your skin, and your interpretation of that forms your reality. Well, the positive polarity is the exact opposite of that. Light comes out of your eyes, sound comes out of your ears, touch comes out of your skin, and you create the world around you. So, by me giving a person the tools to actually experience that and make that a norm, ends up balancing them out. By finding their positive polarity, they become a free will creator, able to radiate their own signal, outwards and actually into the creation around them. And at the same time, I'm not one-sided. I also teach being receptive as well, though right now the condition of the world is such to where it doesn't necessarily pay to be that inward with your energy, until everybody understands that we are interconnected, whether we like it or not, that we do feel all things past the body as being a part of ourself. Even if it's not at the conscious level, then it's affecting your body and your psyche and everything subconsciously. Once we get that ironed out, then we can neutralize our polarity a bit more and be outward and inward at the same time. But it's just been a great pleasure because, even though he's extremely informationally based, it all comes down to the same core that I believe in, that this is a creation from the inside out. We're not at the mercy of anything outside of this sphere of Earth, that we're creating our own time here, that we're in our own zone here, and that, we basically got to clean up, and we agreed on that point. And the point that he stated that the dark, if you want to call them that have X amount of control, they're not going to relinquish it, period, end of discussion. You can't light them out of it. You can't just sit there and send love and wave your pom-poms. You just got to take action, actually.
Exactly.
So we fit right in, and it's really cool because he approaches this in a completely different way than I do, being informational. But I do plan to meet up with him in the near future and show him, the way that I do energy and interpret energy, and then he'll rub off some of what he does on me, and that should be a great moment.
Oh, it'll be wonderful. There's something I say: the cheerleaders don't win the football game; the players.
Yeah. You've got that. Reestablishment of free will seems to be the theme underlying Andrew's work and Peter and Michael's work, and different methodologies, but the actual project is the same.
Yep.
That they could play this out for 20 years unless we get off our chairs and exert our free will.
Correct. There are 5,200 separate sheets that are invested heavily into our solar system to make sure that there is no galactic smuggling of soul families off this quarantined solar system. Though there are good people out there, and there are alien vessels, but they cannot interact with our realm unless they have soul family contracts with the Earth to be here. And what they're doing is they have specialized vessels that are in the upper atmospheres that are taking the consciousness energy of Earth that is forcing negative manifestation and change from Planet X, Nibiru, tidal waves, and they're reinvesting that energy back into the Earth grid so that there's more unified dream time. These vessels are out of phase, and at the same time there are multiple races that are trying to psychically communicate and wake up other members of their soul family. And Michael and Peter, they have incredible teachings that open you up into the energy masteries. And there are multiple other schools out there that teach you different things. This is the time you claim your free will. It's not the time to be communicating with off-world unless you've already done it. And if you do, you have to go through an assessment because your communication can be hijacked and you would never know that somebody else is speaking in the place of the being you were talking to before, or that the information is slightly altered by meaning. So this is the time we re-empower the free will and understand that until we get up off our collective butts, it can get played out, it can be extended for 20 years, and the only random odd thing that's at play is all these trickster spirits that are extremely mad because they're not part of the management system. They were just the thug operators on the low end, and they're all mad.
When you say mad, are they mad because it wasn't what they thought it was going to be, or are they just sick of it and want to move on, and they want to just basically take a baseball bat to the candy shop before they leave?
That, and it's a bait and switch game to them.
Mm-hmm. The re-exertion of free will, the re-empowering of the people, what form does that need to take in your eyes?
Very, very good question. It starts with self-healing, mastering the energies that are around you, disconnecting from the matrix of the media, reconnecting to the matrix of the Earth, as well as learning psychic skills that are protected by the golden tube of protection that allows you to connect to your higher self and into your dream worlds. It is within your dream worlds that you already have 100% free will. But if you're part of a soul society dreams time city state, your dreams are limited. You have to learn how to even disconnect from that to reconnect to the original dream space of Earth, which is the North Pole, where the Aurora Borealis exists.
I get the impression we weren't meant to live in such large groups in cities.
Nope. We were not.
Because we can't really experience ourselves properly when our dream times are so, convoluted with the effects of proximity of, millions of other beings.
Many of us were meant to be nomadic tribes who would go to sacred places on Earth and have children there, and then those children would be the energetic offspring of those energetic places bound with the people in their DNA.
And here we all are, wandering around in concrete and glass and wondering why we're all miserable.
Yep.
You're not painting a great picture in some ways, but in others, it's an absolutely amazing experience and has the potential to be, over the next period of time, the most incredible ride in the universe if we get off our butts, as you say. If we get off our butts and reclaim that free will. So, if the reclamation of free will is to take action and shape the world around us, I must assume you're talking about action by non-cooperation, action by non-violence, but action nonetheless.
Absolutely. Non-violence, non-cooperation. And this is something I've suggested over a series of shows. Forget the government. The only thing anyone should ever march against is the media companies. If you have 10,000 people out in front of CNN, they can't afford to ignore you. And there will be reporters that have left their organizations or announced on air that they are being censored, and they will cross the lines and they'll pick up picket signs. That is the system of control. That is the system where the domination invests their energy. If you have 1,000 people out in front of MSNBC with signs that say, "We demand the truth," you corrupt organization, how long can they ignore that? Can the NBC morning news show even walk outside to do that little bit they do on the Today Show, if you ever watch that? Can they walk outside and talk to their people if there's 1,000 people out there every morning? That goes worldwide, any media agency.
Yeah, there's another aspect to that as too, because I've thought a lot about media agencies and how to actually influence their action. They live for the advertising dollar. So if you want to affect a media agency, you need to stand outside the window on their little studios that overlook the street and hold up signs saying you're a bunch of scumbags. But one of the things you can do is ring up their advertisers and say, "I will never touch your products again," because you're dealing with a corrupt organization who is controlling information and messing with our heads. And if you attack them via their cash flow, you will also be extremely effective.
Well, cash is a lie. And honestly, the media companies the media dollar is a big myth. Because the money that comes in from the media is also supplemented by the government, and all dollars are fake. You don't operate on a real monetary system. And when they removed gold and silver, the physical energy that we invested into the gold and silver had to go somewhere else, and it went into the digital systems of the banks. So that's how the system of energy began to be hijacked, quite literally. And if you want to change, there will be people that were in the media agencies that are so shamed they will walk out and join the picket lines and begin to create their independent media agencies. Honestly, going after the dollar sounds great, but when you understand that the dollar is fake and its whole purpose is to take your energy so it can be reinvested into the system of domination and control, going after them just isn't functional. It's been tried and tried and tried again, and it works on a little scale, but they have to give you a little taste of success for you to stay into the reality.
Hey, I'm happy to change my strategy based on new information, so thank you for that. I won't pursue that one.
The key to experiencing this world right now in a completely different way, and in a way, you know, that can be paradise when you give yourself the right surroundings, is the energy mastery. And it's also the key to becoming a powerful co-creator and a force for change to get the rest of the world in gear, because we're never going to have the world that we desire until each individual understands these basic principles of reality coming from the inside out, of having their brain connected to their heart field, and their heart field connected to the omnipresent I am soul field, feeling all things as being a part of the self. We're never going to have that until each individual can attain this. And as each individual does this, it becomes easier for others. So, you know, it is a snowball effect. But there's, you know, never going to be one singular magical day where everything that you're too lazy to do for yourself just happens for you. And once again, that's part of the false propaganda, and I'm sure Andrew can back that up, that a lot of these so-called ascension dates are put out specifically so that people stop working on their consciousness and their own empowerment. And you know, there's even clever philosophies that go with it, like you're embracing the wrong energy by actually taking action. You know, like, oh, that's 3D thinking. You know, if the 4D thinking is just to allow. Like, come on. So yeah, that's the standpoint I'm always going to come from, is that everybody has to learn energy.
About 30 seconds left. Andrew, thanks for an incredible discussion. Thanks to your audience for listening. Thanks to our audience for listening, and I'm sure they all enjoyed today's show.